start our ugly doll project that we're going to sew, first you're going to need a piece of paper. Make sure your piece of paper that you're doing your sketch on is the same size as your fabric. So I made sure it was the same size. That way everything fits. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, one for the front and one for the back, because we're going to sew these together. I've already done my drawing, so I know what it's going to look like. And then the next step is going to be cutting my pattern out so that I can cut the fabric the right size. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my pattern out. Now that I have my pattern cut out, I can go ahead and start pinning it to the fabric. I'm going to cut out the front and then I'll switch it and cut out the back. Now since my fabric is the same on both sides, really doesn't matter how I cut it. If you had fabric that was patterned and you wanted like a pattern fabric on the back, when you go to cut out the back, you're going to have to flip your pattern so that it fits correctly. Otherwise your pattern is going to be stuck on the inside of your monster. So to cut this, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to take some pins and pin my pattern to the fabric, to the felt. When you're pinning, just be careful not to stab your finger. So I'm going to hold it away from where I'm stabbing. Make sure it goes through the paper and the fabric. And this will just keep your pattern in place while you're cutting. Get it pinned down, then you can start cutting. Once you get it cut out, then you can go ahead and unpin all your pins. Make sure you put them back in the pin container so nobody gets stabbed accidentally. Okay, so once you get both of your pieces cut out, then before we sew these together, we're going to give your character a face and some embellishments. I've got buttons that we can use. I've got these little squares of fabric that we can use. We can also do some embroidery on here. So I'm just going to show you some of the things we can do. We can use fabric scraps. I think I'm going to use part of this for her eye. And see, I want to make sure, I think I'm going to use the flower in her eye as well. So I want to make sure that it fits. And you can kind of draw on some of this felt with a pencil, just enough to see your lines. I think that's good. So, cut out the eye. Like I said, don't throw any of the fabric away because these little pieces are good for adding all the tiny details that's going to give your little monster some character. So I've got that. I think we'll do that. And then I found this fabric with little lips, so I think I'll give it some lips. And then I like this fabric kind of for the tummy, because my pattern had a tummy. Now I just got to figure out where I want that flower to be. So when I cut it, it shows up. Let's see. And I can kind of just see right through this fabric to kind of trace my shape. And then I'll just cut that piece out. So once you've gotten all your pieces and you know how you're going to add some embellishments to it, then you're ready to get your needle and your thread. when you get the thread, notice that this is called embroidery floss. It has paper on it. You don't need to take the paper off, just find the end and you're just going to pull it, gently pull it out. Try to keep the paper on so our string doesn't end up, our thread doesn't end up in a big knot. And I'm just taking it from my hand to my shoulder. Remember to thread the needle, just put it in your piece of paper. If you don't have a piece of paper, just cut one. And then I can stick it right through the hole. These needles are metal, so you'll have to be careful. They're a little sharper. I'm going to take this all the way through. Oops. So what you're going to have is your needle in the middle of your thread. Like so. So I've got both pieces. I just find both pieces, put them together, and then make sure that the needle's in the middle. Oops. And that means I'm ready for a knot. So remember, you're just looping it and sticking it through the hole. I try to keep it towards the end so that I'm not wasting any of my thread. And one knot's probably good enough. I'm going to cut a little of this extra off. And now I can start sewing things on to my monster. I think I'll go ahead and I will start with the tummy. If you need to, you can go ahead and pin it down. I don't think I'm going to pin my down. I think I'm just going to start. Poke it through. Oops. And pull it. Remember, you have to pull it all the way through every time. So I'm sticking it through the felt and my fabric. And I'm just going to go all the way around this piece so that it stays. I want to make sure that my thread is not too far apart so that this doesn't fall off. Alright, now I'm done attaching that piece, so I can turn it over and tie a knot. And then I can just cut off the extra string. So I've got that part. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the mouth. If I want to add a button, I'm just going to go through the back wherever I want it, probably over here towards the bottom of the eye. I'm going to pull this through, and then I'm just going to stick my needle through the button. And then I'm going to go down again, right, not in the same hole, but right next to that first one. Since I'm going through a couple pieces of fabric, I have to push a little harder, making sure my fingers are out of the way. Whoops. So I'm going to pull it. And then if you don't want it really loose and dangling off, then you're going to have to pull it tight And then when you tie the knot, make sure the knot goes all the way to the fabric. So I'm holding it down while I pull the string or the thread. So hold it down while you pull the thread so it's nice and tight. And now I have a little button for the eye. I think I'm going to use the rest of this blue to finish up the eye, this other eye on the side. And so I feel pretty good about the way the front turned out. And now I'm ready to stitch my monster together. So I'm going to make sure they are facing the same way. I want to make sure all this lines up. Yep, looks pretty good. And now I'm going to stitch it together. When you're stitching it together, remember you're going to want to leave a hole somewhere. I'll probably leave my hole towards the top so that I can stuff it. Alright, so I've got my needle and my thread ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and start on the top layer first. And just pull, oops, my thread through like so. I'm doing it this way because I don't want my knot on the outside of my animal or my monster. You can do that, do it on the outside if you want to, but I don't, so I'm just going to put it inside that way. Now I'm just going to start doing a whip stitch. A whip stitch is when you go around. I'm just going to start under. Remember when we did our running stitch, we were just going up and down. Now we're going around, and so we'll always be coming up from the bottom. So go the back and come up every time. When you do this, you're going to want to make sure that your stitches are fairly close together. If you make them really far apart, when we go to stuff your monster, the stuffing is going to fall out. And then when you start to run out of thread, I'm just going to stick it through and tie it off right here. Okay, so once you've got all the whip stitch done around your doll, what you're going to do next is you're going to stuff it. Remember, I left an opening at the top, and then I have stuffing, and I'm going to grab some stuffing, and I also have a popsicle stick because that'll help me push it down. You don't want to put it in a big old ball because we want it to be soft, so I'm going to just pull it apart and put in a little bit at a time, and I'm just going to stick it in this hole, and I can take the popsicle stick and kind of help push it down to where I need it to go. I'm probably not going to be able to get stuffing in the little wings, but that's okay. I have my needle and thread already ready to go. And now I'm just going to sew up the top so that the stuffing doesn't come out. And when you get to the end, I'm just going to tie a knot off. I'm going to come underneath the stitch right here. I'm going to take my needle through, and then I'm going to go back through this loop. And I'm going to push the knot down. And then if you feel like you need another knot, you can just go back through and push it down. And then I can cut it off. And then I have my finished doll.